for many companies, the end customers are actually relying more on the SaaS vendor than the SaaS vendor is relying on the end customer. And so it creates that extremely sticky relationship.
Hello, and welcome to Sink or Swim, a bi-weekly podcast brought to you by RentSync, where we provide an insider's look into the PropTech, multifamily, and rental housing industry. In each episode, we take a deep dive into the technologies and strategies that have helped companies overcome operational challenges and increase the value of their multifamily investments. So, without further delay, let's get into today's discussion.
Okay, so welcome back to another episode of Sink or Swim. I'm Mitch Fanning with RentSync, formerly LWS. And joining me today is Kris Beible of Software Equity Group, a firm that provides M&A advisory services for emerging and established software companies across really a variety of industries, including, of course, real estate. Kris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mitch. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. So this conversation is going to be a little interesting, a little different than usual. Normally, our audience is multifamily operators and property management firm operators and vendors, obviously, from the real estate tech space. But since COVID-19, since there's been an increase in adoption in terms of these operators bringing on technology to run their businesses and do business in a new way. And since you have a ton of experience working with real estate tech companies, specifically on the M&A side, I thought your insights would be of interest to our audience in this ever-changing market. But before we actually dig into today's conversation, or today's discussion, for those who really aren't familiar with you, or SEG, maybe give us a quick primer on how you got involved in the real estate technology space and really SEG.
Sure, and thanks, Mitch, for having me and for allowing SEG to participate on this medium. Just very quick background on Software Equity Group and myself. First of all, I'm vice president with Software Equity Group. We go by the acronym SEG. We've been focused on providing M&A advisory services to B2B software companies for the better part of 20 years. For us, that typically means we're advising companies through either a sale to a strategic buyer or to a private equity or growth equity type of firm, the latter of which has been pretty active and involved in the real estate tech space and the broader software industry, more so over the past few years. And so we're working with maybe a handful of companies per year through those types of endeavors. And then we're mentoring and guiding a lot of organizations in the preceding year to 3 years leading up to some sort of a strategic event. And it's, as I mentioned, it's across the software industry. We happen to have a pretty strong emphasis within all things PropTech or real estate technology related. For us, we first got involved in the space probably 15 years or so ago with a company on the commercial side of the real estate ecosystem called Tririga, which provided integrated workplace management solutions more for owner and occupied commercial real estate. That was some of our first exposure. And then we're fortunate to do our first multifamily deal, I think it was in 2008 or 2009 with RealPage, just before they went public. We sold them a business that got them into the long-term care facility management space. And then from there, we've just been able to build, great network and relationships in the space. And I think we'll cross our 30th deal in the PropTech real estate market this year. So it's been a great journey in the space for our firm over the past little over the past decade or so.
That's great. And I mean, speaking of networking, that's actually how you and I met at an industry conference prior to COVID really breaking out in North America. And I think one of the things that really we had lunch that we started to kind of riff on is because I'm also not a part I don't come from the multifamily background. Just talking about software, the software space or the SaaS space in general was something that we kind of talked about as well. And also just how the PropTech space has really exploded over the last 5 to 6 years was quite interesting to me because prior to that, I wasn't really privy to it. So let's just talk about that for a second. There has been that kind of increase in activity in the real estate tech or prop tech space, but it wasn't always like that. Even though you have a long history, you have that 10 to 15-year history, you've really seen that escalation, I'm sure, firsthand. So in your opinion, why is this real estate tech ecosystem, why is it growing so quickly? Kind of give us a sense of what you're seeing out there.
Yeah. So, I think from a high level, the property real estate market has been pretty slow to adopt technology, over the years. SaaS, has removed a lot of the friction or pain points around adopting, software and using software, in the market. And so, I think because of sort of that barrier being broken down, you've seen a lot of capital flow into the space over the past 10 to 12 years. You've also seen a good number of companies focus on the space, software companies go public, and you've seen those be very successful in the market. And so that has also continued to attract capital into the market and into this broader space. And so you've got a lot of companies that are either growing organically in the space with a good amount of funding and really innovating and providing solutions to the market that are allowing end customers to better manage and operate, their properties regardless of asset class. And then you've also got a good amount of capital that they're leveraging for M&A needs to acquire solutions to get products to customers faster than developing those tools organically. So I think overall, it's just been a significant flow of capital into the space that's allowed for the ecosystem to really grow pretty substantially over the past only 5 to 6 years, but a decade or so.
Yeah, it's definitely been that for sure. I also think, obviously now with the environment we're in, it's been adoption rate has been increasing. Obviously, there's a few drivers when it comes to that, but a lot of it has been due to the end user, and that's really what really is keen here or important. What in addition to that, like you guys do a lot of research, primarily around the public SaaS company index or just the public companies, and you do a lot of tracking around that. And one of your theses and one of the things that you guys are seeing is that the SaaS model, the software as a service model, is very resilient. Why do you think certain tech companies? Why do you think they have done so well? Is it very similar to that, just because they've got that recurring model? Why do you think they've done so well during this time?
Yeah, so I think from a high level, this sort of COVID-19 period has been the first. I think we did a blog article on this, the first quote pressure test for software as a service companies, the really first challenging period of time that they've had to operate in, just because there weren't that many companies deploying via SaaS during the global financial crisis. But, for many companies, the end customers are actually relying more on the SaaS vendor than the SaaS vendor is relying on the end customer. And so it creates that extremely sticky relationship, for, the SaaS company, which, the vast majority of these organizations are on, annual or multi-year contracts with their customers, and they just have very, very high levels of retention. And so the annuity is, it is valued at a premium, particularly in the market today. And so I think you have that sort of dynamic going on just from a high level in the broader, SaaS space. And then, when you look at the real estate, if you drill down a little bit into the real estate space, and we're working with a number of companies, today in market that are performing rather well through this period. We also saw, a similar type of sort of recession resistance occur during the global financial crisis. I can remember us working with a couple of companies in the multifamily space that, just continued to grow, quite well through the global financial crisis. And so I think, from a high level, we would expect, many companies, to do the same during this period in time. But a lot of this is going to be dependent upon, what's, potential subsegment of real estate that you're serving and what types of solutions you're providing to the end market. Some companies are seeing really strong tailwinds during this period. If you've got solutions that are allowing, residents to make payments, online, no one wants to be walking obviously into, the property manager's office to hand off a check in today's environment. So you've seen an uptick in the utilization of payments tools during this period. So those companies providing those types of platforms are doing really well. On the resident engagement or on the tenant engagement side, maybe on the commercial space, needing an engagement platform with tenants to communicate with them about safely re-entering buildings, to work is something that is key. And you may have a bunch of staff that have more time on their hands to strategically think about which products they want to be adopting to better, manage the buildings. So there are other tools which obviously would be in less demand during this time period, but there are certainly those that are seeing strong tailwinds due to this challenging period.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
No, for sure. And as operators continue to lean on technology during this time, instead of being reactive and again, maybe in the past, they haven't had to adopt on this technology or change the ways of doing business. And as they become more proactive, on the flip side, you've got these operators of companies who are kind of in the real estate tech ecosystem, who are providing those subscription services to these operators. Those companies now are in a situation where, because of what the end user is doing, they have to make some decisions. They have to build out or improve maybe their product suite. And in doing so, they have to make some decisions. They have to either build, buy, or partner. When you're talking to, or even just from past experience, when companies are in this situation and they're trying to deploy solutions quickly to take advantage of this kind of, again, this environment, if it's something that, if there is demand for it, how have you kind of instructed or how do you personally kind of see that decision playing out as far as build, buy, or partner in this environment?
And that's from a buyer standpoint. Yeah. So I think, well, number one, I would say, for most of the companies that we're working with, these are businesses that might be 5 to call it $50 million of revenue. So they're relatively small in the broader scope of, software company sizes. You're going to get the most, sort of rewards or value for the business by, maintaining, a level of organic growth, over time, that's higher than, perhaps, those that are, doing so via acquisition and, sort of supplementing maybe modest organic growth with what we call inorganic growth or acquisitions. And so the businesses that, the businesses that are able to sort of control their go-to-market channels and maintain sort of the direct relationship with, customers are also going to be a little bit more rewarded than, say, sort of the opposite approach. And so to the extent that, businesses can maintain sort of organic growth in a direct channel, it's certainly where we would be potentially advising folks to focus first, and then, but taking advantage of opportunistic partnering opportunities with larger vendors where maybe they've got a large distribution channel that you can leverage to get your product in the market quicker. But just always being, cognizant of, not relying on third parties, too much,
right?
And being able to sort of maintain, sort of the direct sort of, channel to your customers, I think is important. And then if you do find something that, your customers are clamoring for and it's highly strategic and you just don't necessarily have the time to build it because maybe you have some other priorities, but you have the cash to make an acquisition, then certainly we would encourage that. Obviously, being careful to not take your eye off the ball of sort of the core business. But if you have the comfort level and financial resources or wherewithal to make acquisitions opportunistically, then we'd certainly encourage that and see.
No, exactly. There's always decisions to be made, and there's always a cost to. You can only do so many things. You've got to choose wisely. Now, the next is kind of a two-parter here. As we kind of look forward, say post even COVID. The first part is, how are you thinking about the future of really the tech ecosystem in general, and let's kind of focus on the real estate side as far as just general activity, and then two, as a result of obviously this transition into remote work, how are you thinking about remote work, maybe just from a personal standpoint as far as like SEG, but just general thoughts on remote. So we'll start with the first part.
Sure. So I think, as we think about the future of the real estate tech ecosystem, we're very bullish on the health of the overall ecosystem, given, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of capital that's been invested in the market over the past, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It's going to propel a number of companies to scale, I think, and you'll see over the next 5 years a very healthy, number of companies that are reaching critical mass, that have, funding. I'm sure we'll continue to see companies IPOing and going public and have access to, additional liquidity. That's going to breed competition, and it's also going to, generate, more innovation over time. And so I think that's good for the overall health of the ecosystem, moving forward. I think that, buildings and facilities just kind of generally are going to continue to become smarter. They're going to continue to become more engaging. If you're thinking about, building on the commercial side, it needs to engage with the employees. It needs to, improve the overall, employee experience when you're actually in the office setting. If you're on the multifamily side, you need to be able to provide, solid communication, good communication to, residents around, use of amenities, and maybe curating, things like, menus from local restaurants to provide, additional services and differentiate your property versus, the one down the street. And so I think that, technology is going to continue to, be a big driver of how, properties differentiate and just generally speaking become, more efficiently managed in the future. Yeah, and then I guess lastly on your question around remote work, clearly the pandemic, fortunate that, we're in a period now where we have all of these great tools that allow us to all work at least some subsegment of the workforce is fortunate to be able to work remotely from home and have the tools to be able to do so. We should certainly be fortunate, those of us that are able to do so. At least, for SEG and for our business, we were already leveraging, platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams to sort of run our businesses on a day-to-day basis. I think this has made sort of our, processes, around collaboration and communication, stronger as a firm. So I think, certainly taking something, as a positive takeaway, from this challenging period. I do think that you sort of miss, the just kind of the socializing of ideas, and, that occur, when you're in person together, working as a team. It feels like there's certainly something that, comes out of being able to physically interact with folks that, creates magic in certain instances around maybe, new product developments or the ways that, we're running deals or advising clients that you get through sort of a physical interaction. So my hope, at least, and I think the way that it sort of will work out is that, there'll certainly be a larger element of sort of working remotely when we're past this difficult period. But I think that there'll still be a need to work, in offices and to, collaborate in person and, on more of a regular basis for sure.
Oh, I agree. I think at the end of the day, there's going to be some type of hybrid. It all obviously depends on the business or the organization or the situation. But I think in a lot of cases, as far as a baseline, it'll be a bit of a hybrid. Now that the genie's out of the bottle, I think you're gonna see that a lot of companies take on a hybrid approach as far as remote work. So we're gonna switch gears for the last time. So enough with the hard questions that so I appreciate your patience. One of the things we're gonna do now is a bit of just a quick fire round to close off, where I'll say a statement and you'll have 90 seconds to respond. Kris,
Sure.
are you ready?
Yep.
All right. First question: what do you believe that others might disbelieve?
That's a good question. So I guess maybe I'll keep it on the topic of M&A. So, one, I guess, misconception, that I think folks have about working with buyers, post M&A deal. So the folks the entrepreneurs that sort of approach working with the buyer post deal that have very high expectations around driving change, and in sort of growth, in the business tend to last the shortest period of time, with the buyer, and those that have sort of very low expectations and maybe don't really have an appetite or care tend to last the longest. And so, what we've generally found is that, the entrepreneurs, that exit to some of the larger buyers, they just have that entrepreneurial mindset. And as much as they would like to, continue to change the world, it's just difficult for them to do that with, maybe some of the constraints of a larger, corporate, setting versus those that really kind of go into it with, lower expectations, tend to find themselves adding a significant amount of value. The buyers are very appreciative of that. And, they're maybe picking up a really nice paycheck, and, they tend to kind of stick around a little bit longer. So I guess that would maybe be a misconception that, we tend to see amongst entrepreneurs.
Oh, for sure. Second question: what have you changed your mind about recently?
What have I changed my mind about recently? So I don't know if I've changed my mind about this, but the whole pandemic has given me a much better appreciation or more significant appreciation for the amount of energy and effort that it takes for my wife to chase around our young daughter every day at home. Seeing it, every single day is it's just amazing. And so I guess that's something that I haven't changed my mind about it. I always knew that it was difficult, but this has given me an even greater level of appreciation for everything that she does.
You and me both. And if my wife's listening, she'll appreciate that one. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
So last question, just to come to a close, where can people find you on the interweb?
Yeah, so you can find us on our website, www.softwareequity.com. We do publish a good amount of research on the broader SaaS and software markets, as well as in the real estate and property technology segments. And so I encourage you to at least visit the research section of our website. And then on LinkedIn as well, Kris Beible. You can find me on LinkedIn.
I usually, when I see it come in my inbox, I'll save it for the weekend because it really is something that I don't like to glaze over. I like to really read through it. And also, you do have a report, and I'm not sure if it happens every quarter, maybe, or just it doesn't happen every month, on the real estate tech space. There was one that I recently downloaded. So lots of good stuff there. So I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we've not only published our, I encourage everyone to sort of maybe sign up for a piece of research content on our website. We publish a good amount of quarterly research. We publish industry-specific research. We also publish lots of different topics around, SaaS software company operations. We're interviewing lots of, industry experts on certain topical areas and sort of trying to publish that on a weekly or sort of bi-weekly basis. And so certainly would encourage, everyone to get on our mailing list and get access to that content on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely. And I'll put that in the show notes. That's it for really another episode. Kris, thank you so much for doing this. Tell Alan I said hello. And
I will definitely do so.
Until next time, keep swimming.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mitch.
You've reached the end of another episode of Sink or Swim. Make sure to visit us at rentsync.com/podcast to access show notes, key takeaways, and where you can sign up to our newsletter to receive free bonus content. If you found value in this show, please also remember to rate, review, and subscribe. That's this week's episode of Sink or Swim. Don't forget to join us next time for another jam-packed episode. Thanks for listening.